Hello and welcome to That Thing I Did for a Year, a podcast where we interview fourth-year University of Toronto students who had interesting experiences away from school for a year. My name is Ilya. I'm a fourth-year industrial engineering student here at the University of Toronto. Behind production is Arkady, a fourth-year engineering science student and the mastermind behind the operation. The mastermind, exactly. So today we're here with Deborah. Deborah, why don't you tell people a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm Deborah. I'm a fourth year Eng-Sci, so I'm in the robotics option. And over PY, I worked at Clarifai, which is like a computer vision company in New York. And then for the summer, I spent it at the MIT Media Lab doing research.
Sweet.
Yeah.
So we'll dig into both of those a little bit, but for a start, why don't you tell people a little bit about like your interests and maybe like some like work related experiences that you had before you went into PY?
Okay. Tell me about yourself.
Yeah, tell me about yourself.
What are my weaknesses and strengths? So like it was really weird. I sort of ended up at UofT like in a weird way. So I thought I was gonna be into like lifestyle and like pre-med stuff.
Sure.
And I was actually like registered to go to McGill. And then I came here and I had a conversation with like a future prof, Jason Foster, and he kind of like talked me into doing engineering by just convincing me that it was like a discipline where you could just build stuff, especially Eng-Sci and like praxis and everything. And that was effectively why I chose engineering, was like I just wanted to like build stuff. And I think like first year was hard because the program kind of just like punches you in the face. And then that summer after first year, I spent working for engineering outreach. So I worked like for just like their junior deed program. I did like a mechatronics like boot camp thing. And then out of that, I sort of like grew this initiative called Project Include, where we teach computer programming to students in low-income neighborhoods in the Greater Toronto area.
That's awesome.
So that was really cool, and that was like a lot of my second year. And the summer after second year was when I sort of started or just even like after that first summer, I started being like, okay, like what am I gonna do? Right. And like I never really, I wasn't very much into tech, so I started coding in like university. So like my first year was when I took my first programming class and like understood like this is what a for loop is. So it was like really crazy. I did pretty well in the class though, so I was like, oh, I'm like not bad at this, and I really enjoyed it just because like I mentioned, I was in engineering to build stuff, and like coding is like this very kind of easy way to build out your ideas. You can like think of something and just like build it. Right. So like out of Praxis, I think like our Praxis 2 project was like to build some kind of app, and I really enjoyed that whole process of like designing a product and stuff. So the summer after second year, I like worked with this startup called the Ottawa SE. So they like develop these like handheld devices for like to like support literacy programs in India. It was really cool. Yeah. So
wait, was that the one that came out of the Hull Prize?
Yes.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was awesome. So I worked with them, and then I did the hatchery at the same time, and I was also trying to like explore research. I like that summer was like an intense kind of like, what do you want to do ? Period. And then also all of second year, I spent a lot of time in hackathons. So like, I think it was the fall of third year. I just like went to like a hackathon a week for like a month. Like it was bad. Like it was like not good for my GPA probably, but like it was, or my stress levels or anything. But it was really awesome because like the first hackathon you go to, you don't know anything, and you're trash, and you're like, I'm never gonna do this. I can't do this. And then the second one you go to, you're like, oh, like I can kind of do something. And then the third one, you're like, oh, I can kind of like maybe do like more things. And it also turned out to be this like interesting kind of like professional experience opportunity. We can like talk to a lot of recruiters and talk to a lot of engineers about like what is it like to actually code for a living. So yeah, like hackathoning was like a lot of my experience in that startup. And then like just because I'm I did sort of do everything for the purpose of building out like ideas. I kind of built out a bunch of projects, and that was really fun. So yeah, the summer I did the hatchery, we actually went to like TechCrunch Disrupt. I don't know if
could you tell people what TechCrunch Disrupt is?
TechCrunch Disrupt is like this like tech conference. It was happening in New York that year. And like one of my friends so it was just like, it's just like a tech conference where they show off a lot of like latest gadgets and like software. You have like really big companies there, but you also have like this like startup showcase, and you have like startups presenting. Mm-hmm. So like this was a period when like I'm realizing like a lot of stuff happened second year summer. And like effectively this was a period where I was really interested in the startup space. So I had been like talking to a lot of startup founders in Toronto, like actively seeking like mentorship and like talking to a lot of startup founders. And they suggested kind of checking out this conference as a way to like, just like see what like, so they have this competition where like effectively aspiring startup founders will go up and they'll pitch their companies and stuff.
Right.
And you have,
Silicon Valley style.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Back to that, the conference in Silicon Valley, the TV show is like based like very closely on TechCrunch Disrupt. It's super funny how similar it is. So yeah, that was a really cool experience to just like sort of be in a space where like, you see like people like really trying to make it, and you sort of understand the landscape of what's going on in the landscape and stuff. So I thought that was like probably like a very informative experience just being at that conference. But more importantly, because it was in New York, one of my friends offhandedly mentioned that like, oh, there was this MSci alumni, he gave this talk at like alumni dinner last year, and like he started a tech company, like a computer vision company, Clarifai, blah blah, that's what they do, and they're in New York. And I was like, oh, okay. So I just literally emailed him, because at that point I had been like talking to a lot of tech founders, so I was just like fearlessly sending emails and like not thinking about it. And that was the first time I met Matt, who's the CEO of Clarifai. Mm-hmm. And that was like the summer after second year. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I actually wanted to do my PUI after second year, where I thought I wanted to do it, but then I was given the very good advice to do third year.
Why was that good advice?
Because so third year was where I learned a lot about actually how to do like computer vision stuff. So we had like a signals course, which ended up being very useful for my Clarifai interviews, because they would ask about like convolutions and convnets and stuff, and like we literally like, we would have like a talk, like a lecture about convolutions, and I'd be like, oh my god, and then like in the interview they'd be like, oh, convolutions, and I'm like, oh, so I know this.
Just for people listening who aren't as into the space, convolutions are like, what are they? So you can, what fields?
Yeah, okay, so yeah, you can kind of just think of it as like a transformation done on an image, where it's just like you're taking the image and you're like simplifying it, so that you can be able to just like interpret like edges and things and decipher what the image is about based off of kind of like less parameters, if that makes sense.
It's a computer vision concept.
It's a computer vision concept, yeah. Oh, sorry. But it's also used in signals. I'm like learning in this class I'm taking, it's also used in like bioelectricity stuff. So it's like used in other, any kind of signal processing. And when you really think about it, like an image, any sort of like input transformation into like an output can involve a lot of techniques in signal processing. So it's like a lot of that is used in computer vision as well. Yeah.
Gotcha. So,
but either way, it's like, I'm just saying like school ended up being useful, doing third year ended up being useful. So I'm glad I did it. We also did like machine learning courses, which was useful. So all of that was, useful. So it was good to do third year before sort of like digging into the job search for PUI.
Right. Yeah. So did you keep in touch with Matt and the people at Clarifai from the summer after second year through the interviewing process during fall of third year?
Yeah, so I never signed up for Portal.
Good stuff.
Which is like, I don't know if that's advice you should give people.
But you didn't.
I didn't, yeah. So I didn't like interact with EEC at all. I sort of had like a couple people that I knew I could talk to. So I sort of had like 2 or 3, like I literally, so I guess like my approach to PUI was like, if I didn't get one that I thought I could learn enough from, or didn't get one that I like truly wanted, I wouldn't do it. Like it's better to not do it at all than to do one I didn't like fully buy into. Mm-hmm. So that was like a very critical kind of realization I had, like start going into it. Like I sort of like established some things where I was like, if it's not like a place I want to be at or a job I want to be doing every day for a year, then I'm not going to do it.
Just do fourth year.
Yeah, exactly. So because of that, I had like a list of like, I had like a running list of like all this, and I wanted to work at a startup because I was very interested in the startup space. I still am, right? So I was like, okay, here's like all the list of startups that I think are really cool. And like a lot of them were Canadian startups, a lot of them were like around Toronto. And then I kind of like whittled that list down to like the 3 that I was like super excited about. Mm-hmm. And like I sort of like kind of like went on like a campaign to like
what does that look like? What does a Deborah campaign for startups look like?
So it looks like it's like a very targeted thing. It's really weird to talk about now. It's like kind of embarrassing, but it was like so for example, like I would read a lot of their, if they published anything, or if they like had sort of any kind of like white papers, I would like read those and like understand. So like I would sort of like understand their like unique value proposition really mm-hmm. well. And then I never wrote a cover letter, but I would send these like emails that were effectively cover letters where I would be like, I really appreciate that your startup is doing this when everyone else in the space is doing this, and this is how I think it's going to be an advantage in this way. And like I would just be like, and I have these skills and I've built this thing, and I think that like this is how it's going to help you. And I would just really like target them, and it would be like I think that's probably an attitude I'm going to take to like full-time job search or grad school or whatever, where it's going to be like I really actually appreciate you as a company or as an organization or as an institution. I really appreciate like this element of what you're doing, and like I really think I can contribute in this way. And then like if it's really hard for me to find that like unique value proposition, it's probably not a place I want to go. Right. So yeah, it was like way more work. Yeah. It's like way more work. I was trying to explain to a friend like what it was about. I wouldn't like recommend it as like I don't think it's like practical at scale. So that's why I only really applied to like, I only really targeted like 3 or 2 like companies that I really wanted to work for. Right. But on the other hand, like they could really appreciate like the fact that I really wanted to work there. And they would like find opportunities to be like, oh, you know, because I actually initially, I wanted to, so I thought I did not want to do like applied machine learning. I actually wanted to do like design stuff for them. And I, like,
what kind of design?
Like a product design type role. Yeah. And that's kind of effectively what I had like first applied for at Clarifai. Mm-hmm. But then they were like, no, you don't have that experience, right. But like you're super interested in Clarifai, and like clearly you can do things and you can build things. Let's see what like makes sense. So then that's how we like, you know, after like investigating a couple roles, I interviewed with their data team after, and that's how I got that. So like that's how I ended up on the applied machine learning team.
Cool.
Yeah.
So let's begin to like Clarifai.
Yeah.
What in a few words, what does the company do? So
they have like a product effectively, which is like a computer vision API where it will have these models, like pre-trained models, where you can send your images to these models. You send your images to our servers effectively, which host these models, and we'll get a prediction for you and we'll send it back to your app. And then you can kind of manipulate that data and like, you know, use it to serve your customers in whatever way possible. So we would have a lot of enterprise customers, but you can imagine like a developer using that product to like build an app to like detect cats or whatever. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
I remember seeing Clarifai. Raji and I were talking about this all over hackathons. Like, at every hackathon, they would have a like best use of Clarifai API app. So I'm realizing
that's how I sort of like knew to like contact them when I was in New York, because I had seen them all over hackathons. I'd been going to these hackathons, so I was like, oh, like. Yeah, like they're definitely legit because they're everywhere. Right. Kind of like Twilio's level of like involvement. And Twilio's like the hackathon company, right?
So just, I think to clear up a few things for people who aren't as involved in the tech space.
Yeah,
so what, basically, correct me if I'm wrong, what Clarifai does is allows other companies and applications to look at images and know what's in those images.
Yeah, so like interpret, decipher sort of like the elements of an image, and it'll generate like a list of labels like cat, dog, if there's an image of a cat and a dog in it. Gotcha. They also have like a lot of other cool products. So they have like sort of like this interesting, there's sort of like unique value proposition is that they have this product where you can effectively train your own model based off of, so we would have like pre-trained models, and based off of like the sort of like we would send the images to these pre-trained models and then sort of like use those predictions based off of these new images and like decipher these new labels. So you can effectively, rather than labeling an image dog, you can name it like Harvey if that's the name of your dog, and be able to identify like your particular dog.
Okay.
So there was like a sort of like custom training feature that like they provided, and like that was also like that was like one of the things that like really attracted me to it, because that was like a really cool kind of like exciting thing to see in that space at that time.
Right.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So like a pretty advanced machine learning and like AI centric company.
Yeah, very. I was like the least educated person there by far.
How did you handle that learning curve? What was that like when you got there?
Yeah, it was hard. So I think they sort of started me off on projects that were easier to get into based off of my background. So they knew what I could do, and they sort of catered to that when I first started. So they would get me building like internal tools to help like clean data, to help like sort of like put together these data sets and things like that. And like it wasn't until like 2 or 3 months down the road, like after like they were like, okay, this is how like machine learning works, and like here's all these papers and like how you understand like how things work, that like I started training models. And that was also like partially because I like took a lot of initiative. I think like when things became challenging and the curve became steep was when I pushed myself over the cliff, where I was like, I volunteer to do this thing that like was like way over my head. And then like when I started doing it, I was like, well, this is way over my head. But then I was like, I want to like really learn this. So like there was a lot of support. I also had like a coworker, one coworker in particular that just like super like went out of his way to like help me. So that was also really helpful to have like a mentor that you could kind of like depend on and like ask questions to.
It sounds like they really invested in you that way.
They did, yeah.
From the outside.
Yeah. It was. I think it was really cool. It was like I definitely came out learning so much more than I thought I would. Even I knew I would learn a lot, but I learned like even more than that. It's crazy. Yeah.
Was there a point in time? You were there for what, 12 months?
I was there for 13 months. Yeah.
13 months.
Yeah.
So was there a point in time where you kind of felt comfortable?
Yeah, there was. So kind of and not really. So it was a startup, and they had these investors, and they had these like clients that were always putting pressure to like do these crazy things tech wise. So there was like always insanity happening, like in terms of just like constantly having ridiculous challenges and like having to like, you know, like put in a lot of effort to like get something done. I don't think there was like a single like board employee. So like I think after like the first 4 months, like you would literally have people being like, you're an intern? Like what? Like they wouldn't like, they would just kind of like after the first 4 months and the other summer interns left, they're like, oh, she's still here, so she must be a full-timer or something. So like after that period of time, I kind of like ended up doing a lot of like full-time work or full-time-ish work as much as I could do. So like after the first summer, I ended up like training models and stuff like that, and that's also kind of like a thing that is very different depending on who's coming with the request. And then like I would say like maybe like 6 or 7 months in, I started doing like back end kind of work, so like how to like serving models or automating like the deployment, like model deployment, so things that were more like I like shifted, my role shifted to make it so like when I was getting comfortable with like the data stuff and like the model training stuff, then like I was given this new sort of like role of like doing like model deployment and stuff. So it was like my role shifted. So I think I might have tasted like one day of like comfort. But like ultimately it was like a very kind of like flexible thing, and because it was a startup, like they needed someone to do different things. So like once they could sort of tell that like, you're done with this thing, okay, or you're like good with this, then like we need your help with this other thing.
Right. How big a company is it? How many people?
It was it's like 60 people. I think when I joined it was like 40 or so. I can't remember, but
roughly
like around 60, like less than 100. But they moved to this new place that's like big, so I'm sure it's like around 100 now.
Okay.
Yeah.
But like you comprised well over 1% of the company. Like,
yeah, I think they were just kind of like, yeah, let's just use her and do whatever we need to do. It was cool though. I like fully did not know anything about backend engineering, and then I like had to suddenly be like writing production Go code. I was like, okay, this is fine. Yeah, it was cool though. I liked it. Yeah.
So it sounds like you grew a lot on the technical side.
Yeah.
What kind of like personal growth did you have to handle that learning curve and like living? You never lived in New York before.
No.
So
have you ever lived in New York?
I've slept a few nights in New York. I've been stranded there.
Yeah. You've been stranded there.
I've been stranded there. But yeah, like
sounds like a good story.
Later. What was that like?
Yeah. So that was like what I wasn't. Yeah. So I think there was like a lot of like coming in. I was like, oh, this is gonna be a cool like technical enrichment opportunity. Like I'm gonna like. Learn so much technical stuff and like come back with all this technical knowledge. And I was completely blindsided by just like the personal stuff. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, people can't see me, but like I'm Black, right? And like in the States, like that is so much more of a thing. Not to say it's not a thing in Canada, but like in the States, it's just like this huge conversation that's happening, mm-hmm. especially like when I like arrived, like just like this like post-November 2016 period. So like I just learned so much about like African American struggle and like just like so much like history about that, and like I was like totally blindsided by it. So that was like a huge kind of like, whoa, like this is insane and this is interesting, and just like getting to meet members of that community. Mm-hmm. So that was like a one thing. And then the other thing was like I was like a child when I moved in. Like I was like I don't like doing laundry, I don't like cooking. I still don't like cooking and I still don't like doing laundry, but like living in like a huge city where like, like I don't know, it just like taught me a lot of things about how to take care of myself. Mm-hmm. I think like one interesting thing was also like figuring out who I was as a person, like what I appreciated, like community wise, but also so like for example, like I like tried to live in Manhattan and it was just like super depressing, like just like going from like leaving your house into a crowd and then like having that crowd walk into a subway, right. Like a crowded subway, and then like leaving and just like being engulfed in this crowd was like, oh my gosh. So I turned into like one of those people gentrifying Brooklyn. So I contributed to that.
Right. You were like an extra gentrifying.
And like I like never thought I cared about like neighborhood or space, but I was like, oh, like I actually like this actually kind of like neighborhood culture matters or community culture matters.
Why do you think you felt that more there than here?
There where?
Why more in New York than Toronto?
Yeah, I think part of it too.
Ottawa.
Yeah, I think part of it too is like not being in engineering. So like in New York, I kind of made friends in like different spheres of life, mm-hmm. Which was really good for me. I think when I came in, so I was like a high school kid that like loved English and history and French and like kind of like humanities courses, mm-hmm. and then like ended up in engineering. I'm like still trying to figure out what happened. But like I think it was just probably like parental pressure or something. But like I ended up sort of in this space where a lot of people were like thinking one way, which I appreciate. Like I really appreciate science and I really appreciate math and I really appreciate physics. But I think like I was sort of missing a community that like appreciated like creativity and stuff like mm-hmm. that. So like in New York was when I sort of like reconnected with that group. And I think like where I lived influenced sort of my community in terms of like who I would be hanging out with. So when I was in Manhattan, I was like, a lot of the people that I like ended up being friends with were like investment banker types people. Like,
oh my god,
no, investment bankers are people too.
Right, of course.
But like it was just like it was like very much like that engineering community. And then like when I moved out to Brooklyn, a lot of the people that I ended up like meeting and being friends with were like much more sort of like creative and expressive and like the culture around. That's why I was saying like I didn't realize like community culture and like neighborhood culture was even a thing. Mm-hmm. So like stuff like that and then you sort of start questioning like what kind of lifestyle do I want for the rest of my life. Like it was like a weird sort of like, this is deep, I apologize.
No, please.
But yeah, like you were sort of realizing like, oh, some of the habits that I'm developing, like if I like work 100% of my time, like do I want to be a person that does this for the rest of my life? Is this something I want? Because it's not like school where you're like, oh, I'm just going to do this for now. It's like, no, this is like a trial period for the rest of my life.
Right.
So it's like, if I like turn into like this workaholic person, which I was for a bit, like I kind of like went through phases, but it was like, is this like sort of the lifestyle I want for the rest of my life versus like when I was like very, like engaged in my community, then it's like, oh, is this the kind of person I want to be for the rest of my life? Like mm-hmm. when I was very engaged in like creative stuff, like is this the kind of person I want to be? So it was like a very sort of like self-reflective period in that sense as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you feel like you came out with any answers or more just like awareness?
Do you have an answer of who you want to be?
Well, I don't know, maybe more.
Where do you
more
see yourself in 5 years?
Was it
I
Clarifai?
Damn. What do you mean? I'm sorry. I
guess we were talking about that growth. Like, did that growth come from just like becoming aware of those different sides of you that you realized kind of needed nourishing? Yeah. Is that kind of like where you were going with that?
I think that's it. Yeah, like that's well said. Like it was identifying sort of like parts of myself that had been like squashed for 3 years of engineering. And just having the space to be like, do I want this to be a permanent squash, or do I want to like let it flower? That was like not well said, but like
no, but I do get where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Do you so you really connected with that community in Brooklyn? Do you think you'll be able to kind of like keep in touch with either that community or a similar type of community now that you're back?
Yeah. So like it was really funny too, because so a lot of the people I went to like comedy clubs and jazz clubs and stuff, and I was talking to people in that scene, and I would always say like, oh, I've never seen anything like this in Toronto. And everyone's like, what are you talking about? Like, Toronto has like this and that, and like, you know, like they have like this thing and that thing, and they have this huge jazz scene. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I had no idea like anything. Yeah, so I feel like in Toronto, like I can definitely like find that community, even on UofT campus. Like there's definitely people still interested in that stuff. I just like never did anything about it. Right. So it's very much like having the space to like figure out that like, oh, this is like stuff I enjoy. Right. So yeah, like I definitely think that like it's not exclusive. Like nothing is special. Sorry. Like unlike the hype would suggest, like nothing is like super special about New York as a city. But just like having the space to sort of discover myself and being in a city where there is a lot of stuff happening, like enabled that. But I think like definitely there's a lot of stuff happening in Toronto, and like I'm hoping I can find similar-ish community here. And if not, like, yeah, I definitely still stay in touch with the people I met over PUI. Especially when I started getting into research, like, I'll like see them at conferences, I'll see them like, you know, we stay in touch, like so like I haven't like lost those friends, but I am aware that like it wasn't like a localized thing. It's kind of on me to sort of like wherever I am, sort of like make sure that I'm engaged in activities that actually like, you know, like that I actually enjoy, that actually like, you know, feed me, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So, speaking of things you enjoy in research, your summer. So where did you spend your summer again?
So the MIT Media Lab is like this lab at MIT in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and it's like sort of this weird kind of space where they do like anti-disciplinary research, which is like a bit
air quotes.
Air quotes, anti-disciplinary research. Yeah, so it's like a little bit research that like wouldn't get funded anywhere else really. Or no, that's not true. That's not true. I wouldn't say it that way. But it's like research that like is just sort of on the edge of it, where it's kind of like risky stuff that is sort of hard to place in any discipline. Very like cross-disciplinary projects and things like that. And it was a good, I think it was a good, so I was very scared of research since first year. Like it was just a very intimidating sort of thing for me to see.
Why?
So the summer after my senior year of high school, I volunteered at a bioengineering lab at like Ottawa. And it was like not fun. Like I was just like, well, I was a high schooler, and then I think about it, like, why would they let me do anything? But like I was like pipetting and like like washing a petri dish and stuff, and I did it a couple times, and I was like, oh, this is like not fun. And like that's what I thought research was. That's what I thought like people did when they did summer research, was just like routine lab work. But the thing is, like, I did enjoy labs. I enjoyed writing lab reports, and like I enjoyed labs as like a course labs, and like I did really well in those, and I understood that there was like something there maybe, but I was like, oh, like it's for like those people, you know, like it's not for me.
Like ivory tower type.
Ivory tower, yeah. It was like I really value access, which is like one of the things why that's like one of the reasons why I'm attracted to startups, is because they're so accessible. Like it's like flat organization. It's very easy to like talk to anybody at most, with a little bit of persistence, but like it's like you can like usually access a lot of these like startups. They're very open. And like research seemed like the opposite of that. It seemed very closed, which was like a huge turn off. But then the Media Lab was like kind of a startup-y vibe. So like it was a very kind of like open lab where they were very open to collaboration. They were very open to like suggestions. People were collaborating in interesting ways. Very flat organization. Like the director was just like walking around. Like it wasn't the hierarchy that I was like assuming existed in research. Like didn't pan out when I actually like participated. And then the other thing too was like I don't know, like the particular community that I ended up in, like machine learning in general, like is sort of a similar vibe where like as a research community, machine learning is very open, very accessible, very pragmatic. And like because of that, like it was like very much the opposite of like what I assumed research had to be.
Right.
Yeah. So it's just kind of like happening to be in the right field to actually like be in like a research community that like made sense given like my values. Yeah.
So was it through Clarifai that you found your way to the MIT Media Lab?
No, not at all.
So how did that happen?
They were separate activities. It's a weird story. Okay, so it's a weird story. So how do I even say? So I guess I was like I watched a TED Talk. So someone at the Media Lab gave a TED Talk. This is also just like it's just kind of like a testament to like how like emboldened I was after like meeting a bunch of mentors after second year. I felt like I can just email anyone. LinkedIn anyone is fine. So this is a TED Talk, and the talk was about a researcher at the Media Lab that had she had been trying to do a facial recognition project, and it wasn't able to like recognize her based off of her skin tone. So it was clear that the model hadn't been sort of like calibrated to quote unquote to like work with like particular skin tones and things, and that was like alarming to her. And that was just the extent of the talk, was just kind of like bringing attention to the problem of like, oh, you know, especially some of these open source. The context of at that time was just like a lot of these open source systems, you know, don't accommodate all these different variations in like skin tone and gender that exists in facial recognition. It was like this very narrow scope.
Right.
But then while I was at Clarifai, we were able to sort of like identify, while working kind of training models for clients, I was able to sort of like identify the issue happening. And I was like, oh, like this is not just a thing that is with open source things. This is a thing that affects like commercial API systems as well, where it's like, these models don't work equally well for everyone. And then the other thing that was like agitating me at the same time was, so Clarifai is a really awesome sort of like research focused company. So they will, papers flow through the company, you know? So like
papers, you mean like research papers on machine learning? On
machine learning, yeah. So like I just got to like read a lot more about machine learning while I was there, even though I wasn't like on the research team, for example, is what I'm trying to say. And you sort of start realizing like, oh, and then I got the opportunity to sort of like tag along to NIPS, in I think that was like November, and like just kind of like get a certain awareness of like what was happening in the machine learning research field. And I realized like there was this huge problem where people weren't really asking questions around like bias in machine learning, and people weren't really discussing like interpretability as much at that time. So they were. What is interpretability? So they weren't like trying to understand how these models work. It was a very like hyper pragmatic kind of like
black box.
Yeah, they were like you know, it's just like let's add more layers and like it works. Awesome, like let's just go.
Cool.
So people were really like, why does it work? Like it wasn't, which is like one of the things that attracted me, but it was also like, oh, this might become a problem when you're giving results and like no one can really explain why these results occurred, and those results might be like biased or unfair.
Right.
So yeah, I just became interested in that. So I literally emailed her being like, oh, like kind of similar to like the pitch. I feel like this is like the way I kind of get jobs is just like pitch, like, oh, like, you know, I'm interested, you know, you could have my skills, I can help you in this. So I sort of was just like, I see what you're doing here, this is super interesting. She was one of the only people working on this problem at that time, which made it really easy to reach out to her, because like, no, I guess it was like super interesting to the greater population.
She didn't exactly have a full inbox.
Exactly, yeah. Right. Well, she did have a full inbox. She was doing other really cool stuff, but
not on this front.
And this particular topic wasn't super hot like a year ago. So like when I reached out to her, it was still sort of like, yeah, sure, like help out in this way. So I helped her out over the year, and I just kind of like volunteered with her in my spare time. And then I was looking for something different to do over the summer, and I was like, oh, like, and she's like, yeah, just come. So that's how I ended up there. Yeah, it was amazing. Very casual. But I was like volunteering for about a year with her remotely, and then I kind of just joined for full time for the summer because I kind of needed something different for the summer. Yeah.
So you moved out to Cambridge.
Yeah.
Okay. What?
And over that year, it became like the super hot topic. So like when I first kind of started it, it was like we were both like, there was a couple people that had sort of been doing it for years, but then there wasn't like a lot of people. Like the conference we went to was just like enough to fill out like, an auditorium, which is like a smallish conference. And then like over the year, there's just like her research in particular got a lot of press, and like there was just like a huge like ripple effect, and it became this like super like big thing. So now it's like a very kind of like sexy sort of like machine learning topic, which I think is like super interesting. Like over the years,
that's awesome.
Literally, yeah. So that was also like part of like how I was like, oh, maybe I should like focus on like supporting this more and getting more into this, just like because it was just like, oh, this is a legit thing. We should probably like do more. Yeah, like, we should take this more seriously and like like formalize some of these ideas that we've had. So that was kind of like what pushed me to get into that as well.
So is this kind of the interdisciplinary or like anti-disciplinary type like idea of like in this case is bias and societal bias and machine learning? Is that like generally the kind of thing that was happening at the Media Lab? Yeah,
there was like, I thought the Media Lab was an interesting place because it's like you have like very established sort of labs. Like they have like a biomechanics lab that's like, very like prosthetics and like doing prosthetic stuff, which is like sort of this like sort of like traditional field of interest.
Sure.
But then they would be thinking about like different things with regards to prosthetics that I was thought. So they would be like consulting with like UX people and being like, how do we make this look good, and how do we make the person wearing it feel good, and like how do we serve the customer in this way? And I thought that was like interesting. So even in like you would have like more rigid groups like that. You would have like viral communications where you're like everyone in the group is doing something different, or civic media where we went.
Is that a fancy word for memes?
Viral communication. Or like viral tweets and stuff. I don't know. Like everyone was kind of doing something. Everyone was kind of doing their own thing, and then like they would just find like a vague umbrella to put it under.
Right.
Like there was like more established sort of groups for sure. But like everyone was kind of just doing their own thing, which is I thought was really cool. It was also like a do-ocracy. That was like the way someone described it, where it's like the more you do, the more you're supported and encouraged, versus like a meritocracy or like, I don't know, like nepotism.
So how would you
like really
distinguish between a do-ocracy and a meritocracy?
So a do-ocracy would be like literally the more ideas you build out, the better things are for you. Whereas like a meritocracy, it can kind of turn into like, there's more of a competitiveness. Where it's like, perhaps this person deserves more because they did more work, or they had more visibility in this sense.
Right.
Whereas a do-ocracy is literally like, I had more ideas that I made happen. Like I just literally got more, like I got more stuff done in the sense of like I had more developed, like I had more ideas and I like built them out.
Right.
So I feel like that was sort of how in my mind.
And so it's like with the do-ocracy, it's less of a zero-sum game.
Yeah.
It's not about did you have more ideas than this person, did you beat them? It's how much did you do? There is enough to go around to earn it through your actions.
Yeah, it's more of like a win-win scenario, and it's very much less competitive.
Right.
Which I really appreciated. I thought that was really cool. Being in a space where like, especially with like academics, like it was just really cool to see like a space where like, there was just less competition and everyone was very excited about building out their ideas and like building out as many ideas as possible. Yeah.
It sounds like both your Clarifai experience and your MIT Media Lab experience were focused on building out a bunch of stuff. So
it's like the theme of my life, though.
No, and that's awesome. That's very engineering.
Yeah.
Says the apparently former life sci kid. But I guess was there a difference in flavor or in like how the process happened to building at the research lab versus
Yeah, for sure. I think that's why like research is now this interesting thing for me to look into, because so like in industry context, there are constraints that might actually limit the scope of what you can do. So like in industry, like you have to like accommodate particular clients, for example. You have to like think about money and cost and just be like more pragmatic. And then like as like an engineer in that context, so I think Clarifai did a good job like kind of giving space for like creativity. So they would have like 20% time. They would have like hackathon days and opportunities to like encourage people to like build stuff, which I appreciated.
Right. Just for context, like 20% time is this, I think, Google originated idea where you spend 20% of your time at work just working on passion projects and whatever you think is cool.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But then like I think ultimately it would still like the most valuable projects would end up having to like bring in money in some way for the company. So there was sort of like a limit in that context. Whereas like I think the research context was super exciting because you just like built stuff that you thought was a good idea. And as long as it made sense in the context of what other people were doing, it could even be like completely different from what everyone else was doing as long as you could justify that like departure, you know? So it was just like really, it was like less barriers, like less constraints. It was very like open-ended. And I really appreciated that, I think.
Right. Would you have to kind of like justify the societal value of what you were doing?
In both cases, I think you have to justify the value. Like, I think you always have
I mean, like at the media lab, like how would you justify the value of something you're doing at like an anti-disciplinary, like creative research space?
Oh, I see. Like, how do you like say like...
How do you say like this is worth doing?
Yeah. There's a couple ways to do that. One is like contextualizing it in past research where you say like, this is what other people have done, this has been their contribution, and here's my contribution, and here's how it extends like this particular field. That's like one way to do it. Another way could just be like, here's all the applications of like how, like if this works out, here's all the ways that it can actually be implemented and be used. And that's like another sort of way that people do it. And then the other way, which is like unique to the Media Lab in a sense, where like you would have like these like corporate sponsors interested in particular projects. And that would sort of indicate to you like, oh, this is something that's of value to like industry or of value to greater society if you have like governments interested in particular projects. So civic media is like sort of tied to these like government projects and things like that. So I thought that was really cool as well. So it's just like if you have an audience that sort of proactively sees the value in it, or if you can contextualize it in research and be like, I'm moving the field forward in this direction in this way, then that's usually enough justification to like go ahead. And then like the kind of fast prototype ideology makes it so that like even if you don't justify it, if you just like there's a bunch of projects which are just cool and like people will just like build it, and then once it's built be like, oh, was this useful? And then reflect on that. So like if it's like a quick prototype cycle, I feel like it's easier to just like build a bunch of stuff, and like that's usually some of the best ideas like that just kind of like happen. Like you just do the experiment, you just like build a quick prototype, and then you show someone and you get feedback, and the feedback is good, and then you keep going. Or if the feedback is bad, you rework it, you know. So things like that as well probably helped them filter out projects.
Gotcha. Did you interact with any like cool non-tech stuff while you were there?
In Cambridge?
Yes.
What do you mean non-tech stuff? Just
well,
like,
I was
less. Oh, actually, I made a bunch of like musical friends.
Okay.
So I met a bunch of people. I don't know how this happened. I don't know. I had a friend that was doing his PY in Cambridge, and like through him, I like met one person that went to like Berkeley School of Music, and then like through that girl, I like met like a bunch of people, and that was really cool because it was like jazz musicians and stuff like doing gigs and stuff, but like my age. So it was like really cool. It was really cool. They invited me to the studio, and like I was like the one engineer that's like, this is so cool, and they're like, okay, shush. Like,
for context, Deborah just threw up like the praise hands emoji.
It was fun. I really liked. That was like a different type of music scene for sure, but it was really cool. I liked it a lot. It was very fun. And that was like sort of. It was also really interesting meeting people studying music and pursuing like music careers. I thought that was interesting. Like their set of priorities was just like 1,000%, you know, different. like their commitment to sort of like their passion was very different. It looked very different from what I've been used to hearing. So that was really cool. Yeah. So there was like a lot of interesting sort of experiences that came out of that.
Right.
But then also like I met MIT students. I met students at like Northeastern. I kind of like I just met like random people in the city too. So like I kind of like met a lot of really interesting people in Boston in particular that really like contributed to my personal growth that I still talk to. So yeah, I guess like interpersonally wise, I met a lot of really cool people. Yeah.
So MIT is like a pretty renowned school.
It's okay.
It's tight. Yeah. It's only in Massachusetts.
Engineering UofT.
Yeah. But so I guess like my question is, was there anything you saw there where you were like, man, like we could and should be doing more of that here?
Oh God, yeah. Yeah. There was a couple moments where I was like, oh my gosh, like why don't we do this?
Like, what were some of those things?
One of the things is like, so there's like a lot of them were related to like encouraging student like self-discovery. So I think MIT did a really good job of just like kind of pushing students to like really like define like themselves and like define their interests early on and like aggressively pursue it, if that makes sense. I think U of T is very, and like Canada in general, like Canadian education systems in general are very conservative. So they kind of, their goal is more education oriented. They're very like, we want you to come out with these technical skills. And they're not necessarily, like there are, I think U of T engineering is sort of, and like I came back and I realized like, oh, maybe there's this sort of happening. Like we have iLead and things like that will sort of like push students to discover themselves, define their values, pursue their interests, and like encourage them and support them to pursue their interests. But I think MIT really like pushed students to like discover themselves. So like for example, like they would just like give them a lot of opportunities to explore different career paths, and they would like push them to do like to explore research. And it was never in the context of like you have to like this or you have to be this type of person. It was always like be exactly who you are, but like know who you are
and like really aggressively be that person.
Yeah.
Right.
And like so you ended up with people that like really knew themselves, and they were like first year, like okay, it's like second year,
right.
Like, they had like kind of like come out of the year being like, oh, like this is the kind of person I am. This is the kind of person that, like, this is what I like. This is what I want to pursue. I want to do research. Whereas here, I feel like we're not supported as much in terms of like defining these things. Of course, like in every school, you'll like have people that are like that. In every school, you'll have people that are more sure or less sure. But I think they really just have like a lot of support in place for like self-discovery, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like just like so many like. So like one thing, for example, is that they had like a semester between their fall and winter semester, like a mini semester.
Was it called intersession?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, you've done your research. Okay, yeah. But it was like, where you can like just like do an internship in the middle of the year. And like that's just like one more opportunity to discover yourself and figure out what you want to do. And I thought that was really cool. I think like things like that would really, really help at U of T. I think there's a lot of, it sometimes disappoints me or frustrates me when you're like talking to some people and like their scope of sort of like what is available to them to pursue or do is like a little bit narrow, where they're like, oh, I have to work at XYZ tech company, or I don't know, like their goals just seem like a little bit short-sighted, and you're like, wait, no, but like there's so much more, like you can do this or this, and like have you tried this, like you should explore this. So just kind of like encouraging people to like take the path less traveled and really explore, and like helping them understand that there's no like rush, like you can really explore things, and once you explore things, that's where you really find the thing that you care about and can like actually excel in it. Right. So I think that like message was a little bit more explicit there. Yeah.
Right. It's almost like not being encouraged to survive, but rather being encouraged to thrive. Well, like very aggressively. Yeah. Like that's
okay, Tony Robbins.
Okay now. Okay.
No, that was a good line. I have a t-shirt that says that. Don't survive, thrive.
Oh my god, this is a book we were talking about recently. I said like a survival is insufficient.
Like I think one of the reasons, I was also thinking like, oh man, like how did I even end up having that attitude of like like kind of aggressively find that thing and pursue it.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized it was because I had spoken to a lot of alumni that like second year. So I guess alumni is also a huge part of it too, where like alumni are like omnipresent at MIT
mm-hmm.
and like a lot of American schools. I spent time around like people at NYU and like Columbia when I was in New York too. Mm-hmm. And like at a lot of American colleges, alumni are sort of like this like omnipresent force. And
like they're very proud of where they went to school.
They're very proud of where they went to school, mostly because there's like 3,000 colleges. So like if they went to a school that people can recognize, it's like win.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like they are very like, they have a lot of school pride, which I think we have too, but like their alumni were just like, sort of like they could reach out to alumni without any problem.
Sure.
They had a lot of like literal infrastructure in place to support them. So they have like tools, like literally like, which we're sort of starting to develop at UofT. So you can kind of see that like beginning to happen at
mm-hmm.
UofT. But yeah, like I think it's like been very, like it's like a much more established sort of process, in the States. And I think like I went out of my way to reach out to a bunch of alumni, in second year and like after that first year summer. And I think like talking to those people and like getting mentored by those people like really changed my like perspective, because
right.
like a lot of these people that you see that you're like, oh, you're doing exactly what I want to do, and like I should do step 1 and step 2 and step 3, and then you like talk to them and they're like, no, I like failed at step 1, like this, like I ended up taking like the back door in this way, or like climbing up this mountain, and then like it's just like never a straight path.
Yeah.
And then like the more people you talk to, you realize like, wow, it is never a straight path, and then you become more comfortable exploring. And then
right.
I feel like that's like how that attitude kind of develops from that. So like I feel like I went out of my way to talk to alumni, which is how like I ended up like sort of like in a community where I was like, oh, this is a lot of this, like it personally resonated with me, because I was like, oh, this is like a lot of the stuff that I believe, and like these are a lot of the values that I see, except it's mm-hmm. like institutionalized, and like more people are sort of like hearing about this. Yeah. So I think that like the alumni component really helped as well. Yeah.
Right.
That's like another big difference, I'd say.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things that, like, just even based off of your example, is available at UofT, but is pushed over there.
Exactly. Uh-huh. Yeah. So, like, this is, like, another example of something that is, like, it's totally here.
Right.
But, like...
this isn't even that big a shift. People just need to do it.
Yeah, we just need to do it.
Right.
Same with, like, it's like, we have, like, a comedy scene. We have things at UofT. We have, like, a very rich culture. Like, UofT is a very cultural city. We're just, like, locked in Robarts, you know?
Right.
We're just, like...
Truly the curse. Truly the curse of undergrad.
Honestly, I'm like, this year I'm like gonna go out into the city more. Toronto's a beautiful city and there's a lot of stuff happening, but like we just don't take advantage. Same with UofT. There's so much happening at UofT. We just like don't take advantage. Yeah.
So I mean, along with that, like, what do you think is going to be different about like fourth year and how you approach fourth year now that you've had these experiences?
Yeah. So like, I care about thesis. So yeah, like I'm still unsure about what I'm doing, as usual. So I'm taking fourth year to really like clamp down on some of the stuff I discovered over the year. So like effectively continuing to define who I am and remain flexible in that exploration. So I'm doing a lot of research stuff in general, like a lot of research stuff this year, and then I'm like, I took classes that like will sort of like help me figure out like I actually like took classes that I cared about, because I was like, oh, like I actually want to learn particular things to see if I like can do this thing. So like I feel like exploring research is like a huge shift that happened after the summer, after the year. Getting into machine learning. So like I think before Clarifai, I was just like a person that like liked coding as like a prototyping tool type thing. And then like after Clarifai, I'm very much like, oh, computer vision, oh, machine learning. It's really cool. So like I think like getting more narrow focus that sense. Yeah, I think like, so like just kind of like being more conscientious about school. I don't think I was like very into school the last 3 years. Right. I sort of just did it. And like I sort of like approached it hacker style. So I would be like, oh, you know, if I do this while on these quizzes, then like I can just do this on the exam. I was a very like exam heavy, you know, those like exam heavy people. I was one of those.
Yes.
Where it's like they show up to the exam and they do the exam, and the exam is like carrying their entire grade.
But like much though. Yeah.
So I was like that person. And then like, I think now I'm very much like, oh, I actually want to, but then like as soon as the exam's done, I like don't know anything. Right?
And now you want to know it.
Yeah, now I know. Yeah. Now I'm like, oh, it's useful to know things. Like, knowing things actually helps you in life.
That is...
Learning
that's a big win.
It's useful.
It's a big win.
Yeah, so like an appreciation for like academic settings as actual avenues to learn. I think I used to be like a person that was like, one of those people that would be like, oh, like, you know, I learned by doing, or like, oh, like I learned more at hackathons, or like at like internships than like, than in an academic context. But then I realized like, no, like you can learn if you take the right classes and sort of like do the work. There's a lot to learn from school. Mm-hmm. So I think I like a greater appreciation for school for sure. And then just like this like hyper involvement in research stuff are sort of the big differences for fourth year. Yeah. And then like I guess like just being more concerned with that than like other stuff happening. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think the last thing is you mentioned that you were a product of Mentors and that really changed the perspective that you had on a lot of the things that you did after second year.
Yeah.
If people want to reach out to you as now you are going to be a mentor to people with all of these wonderful experiences that you've had, where could or should they find you?
Okay, so Facebook, I guess, mm-hmm. If they, so like Deb's Raji on Facebook, I guess is probably the easiest way.
We'll post something.
Yeah, or like, I guess, like you could email me. No guarantees about email, but like mm-hmm. Facebook is definitely a way for me to just like bookmark it.
Right.
I'm not sure how available, I'm like not sure if I'm like mentor status yet though. Like I haven't like done anything yet.
I think most people listening would disagree.
Yeah, so like I guess like if you have questions, I'm definitely like an open person to talk to. I also like am just around a lot. I realize like just like being available is like this thing that you know, we sort of take for granted, like the person that is like kind of open door. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I feel like if like someone catches me somewhere and they ask questions, I'll definitely be open to like answering them.
Sweet. Was there anything else that you wanted to say or talk about?
No. I guess one thing I wanted to mention was like I started a Twitter account, which is really cool. I'm not going to share it now because it's like super embarrassing, but it's really funny because like in machine learning, the community communicates along Twitter. So it's like this like professional, it's like a LinkedIn effectively. It's super funny. Yeah. So like fun fact, if you want to do machine learning, you should probably start a Twitter account. Start accruing those followers.
Hot tips. Gotcha. Learn neural nets, do internships, start a Twitter account.
Start a Twitter account. Just do it.
Okay, that's as good a place to end.
That was something I didn't expect. It was so funny. And like everyone had it. It was so funny. Like you'd have people with like viral tweets and they'd be like kind of like famous and but like just within the machine learning community. Like,
right.
And like the moment I realized it was like I met this guy that's like machine learning famous but not actually famous. And I took a picture and I was like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe this. And I shared it with my friend who's just like she's like a mech student here. And she's just like who's this guy? I was like so I was like, I took a picture with this person and they're like is that like supposed to be like a famous person?
That's how you knew you were in the bubble.
Yeah, that's when I was like, oh frig, I'm in deep.
That's good. Yeah. Hashtag deep learning.
Hashtag deep learning. Oh, frig.
As good a place to end as any.
Okay.
All right, so Deborah, thank you for talking. Thank you for spending the time.
Okay.
This has been That Thing I Did for a Year. We'll see you next time.